Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 74. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and thank you so much for joining me. If you have been listening for a while and you've not yet left a rating and review, I would love it if you would do so. Now, iTunes is a little tricky. I don't know why they make it so difficult to leave a review, but if you're already a subscriber, it's really hard to navigate that and figure it out. So I'm going to leave a PDF in the show notes, and the show notes, you can get those at hustleandflowpodcast.com/74. But we'll put a PDF link in there that really, it's got pictures and descriptions on how exactly you leave the review. But yeah, if you've not done that yet, I would appreciate it if you would do so. It really does make a difference in helping other attorneys find the podcast and know that it's something, that others can relate to, and it's something that they can trust and listen to. So thank you for doing that for me. All right, today's topic is so loaded. I have been thinking about this episode from the very beginning. And, this is episode 74. So it's taken me a while to actually think through how I want to address it. And I had started a loose outline. That's how I do all of my podcasts. I have a loose outline and then I just talk, because that's when I'm my most honest and authentic. And it's just a representation of who I am and the way I coach and teach. So I have my loose outline for what was really work-life balance privilege. And then Kate Spade took her own life. And that really impacted the way I wanted to approach this episode, because it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're going to talk about. And so, between last week when the outline was written and right now when I'm recording the podcast, that happened. And I think it really does need to be part of the discussion. So I want to talk about privilege. I want to talk about guilt. I want to talk about well-being. I want to talk about myths. So again, there's a lot there. So let's just get started. All right. First and foremost, I don't believe there's such a thing as work-life balance. And you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, Heather. You talk about work-life balance a lot. You have a retreat called Life and Law in Balance. Here's the thing. When you are trying to help others, when you are talking to others, when you are serving others, it's important that you use their language, okay? That's marketing 101. And that's not to be deceitful. It's so that you can connect with people where they're coming from, where they're starting from, so that you can help them. So if you are talking about something else and that's not how they're talking, they're never going to find you. And I will tell you, so many of the women that come to my retreats, and by the way, get a ton out of them, it is truly a transformational experience. They tell me the reason why they signed up was because of the name of the program, or they did a Google search, and SEO matters, and they were searching for balance. Okay. So although I don't believe that there's such a thing as work-life balance, I fully understand and appreciate the need and the desire for what we think is balance. Now, I don't really think that that's what we're truly looking for. I'll get to that in a minute. But that's the nomenclature we use. So we talk about work-life balance. But when I think of balance, I visualize the scales of justice. I don't know why. I've always done that. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm a lawyer, but I see the scales. And when something is truly balanced, it's equal, right? And so if you've got work on one hand and life on the other, and they're perfectly balanced, I just don't think that's possible. It's hard to have a life if you're only working such that it is fully balanced. I mean, I personally don't know how you pay the bills that way. And maybe you're into the 4-hour work week and, everything else. And if you can make that happen, good for you. I don't think that's possible for most people. And me personally, I mean, I don't want that. I love to work. And I think a lot of people do love certain aspects of their work, not all of their work, but it's why I think you see attorneys rarely retire. I was joking with someone yesterday. We were talking about the baby boomers, and we're like, they're not going anywhere. I mean, they're going to die in their law firms. They are not retiring. And so it's creating this weird transitional issue where millennials, to some extent Gen Xers, are really having a hard time where everyone's finding their place because the natural progression out is not happening. So balance for attorneys, one, I don't think it's possible, but two, I don't even really know if it's desirable. So before I get into what I think attorneys are really looking for when they say they want more balance, I do want to address what this episode was originally going to be about, and that's perspective. I think many of us either struggle with not having perspective or struggling with guilt. And honestly, it's just two sides of the same coin. So when we talk about work-life balance, it's really, really important that we recognize just how privileged of a conversation that even is. It is such a first world problem. And it is such a professional, higher class problem. There's so many articles written about it and we all talk about it. Some people, I think, have a little bit more perspective because depending on who you're serving as clients and, who you're dealing with in everyday life, you may fully appreciate that you have it well off. Others may be in a bit of a bubble, either in terms of their own backgrounds and families and how they were raised. You may have been born with a lot of money and went to really great private schools where all of the children around you also had a lot of money. Now you're in a lucrative career. And if you're in big law and you're mostly working with, or even at a corporation where you're working with, clients and colleagues that are very well off, it can be difficult to maintain the perspective that your concept of balance may not be real. So many people are struggling in America and throughout the world, and they have several jobs. When I think back to my own background, my own family, my grandmother, she was probably the hardest working person I ever met. And she had 9 children and an alcoholic husband. And that meant that most times she was the sole breadwinner. And yes, they lived in government housing and they received funds, but that's not enough to feed 9 children. And so she had several jobs without a car. She either walked or she took the bus. And that's not just a generational thing. It's not like, oh, well, that was a long time ago. There are still many, many people in America in that same situation where women and men are working extremely long hours and carrying multiple jobs or can't find jobs. And I can assure you that they're not talking about balance. They're not reading articles about balance. They're not going to organizations or associations or having committee meetings about balance. And I think that we rarely discuss the fact that this balance discussion is so dang privileged. I think of my sister, who's a kindergarten teacher, and her husband, who's a police officer, and they can't hire help. I mean, that's one of the solutions that we often discuss as lawyers is hiring a lot of help. They can't do that. They're on state salaries. That's not an option for them. And yet, in addition to their full-time jobs and raising their children, they're super active in their community and always trying to help others. For those of you that know teachers or have teachers in your family, you know that they are often at school when they're not really being paid to be there. They stay late. They go to all of the programs and activities. They go on weekends. They're often there in the summer doing prep work or just otherwise checking up on children. And so they don't really talk about balance. They just do life the best they can. And so I want us to recognize that it's a privileged conversation. Now, the second part of that, and this goes to the guilt, even though it's a privileged conversation, I still think it's worth having. Because if we're in a situation where we can aspire to balance, why wouldn't we? Maybe you're serving clients that don't have much. And so you see this and you feel guilty for saying, well, how could I possibly want balance when they're working all of these jobs? Well, your being unbalanced does not in any way serve them, right? They know other people in their situation. You can still be compassionate and empathetic and want better for them without saying you have to live in the exact same circumstances. When you think of other countries, right, and what people are going through, you think of Syria and the refugees, or you think of women who are either in communities basically working from sun up to sun down, or women that don't have options or choices. It doesn't serve them by us feeling guilty for our first world, higher class privileged discussions to say, well, if they don't have it, we shouldn't have it either. It is through our pursuing these things that it allows us to actually show up and serve better in a healthier way. And I think show others what's possible. When we fully embrace our opportunities and we try to make those available to as many people as possible, that is far more productive than saying, well, I'm going to expect less or settle because others don't have as much as me. So that's why I say it's two sides of the same coin, because if you feel guilty and if you don't pursue it, then we're all just miserable and unhappy, right? And that doesn't accomplish anything. I personally think that if you can take care of yourself, it's going to give you so much more to give others. So yes, it is privileged, but we still need to have the conversation, and we still need to aim for, again, we'll get to this in a minute, that balance that we're seeking. But if we don't recognize it's privileged, then quite frankly, I do think that it is a disservice to others that are in situations that are not like ours. And it starts to separate us, and we fail to see how much we have. And if you don't have perspective, and if you don't have gratitude, it actually defeats the very thing that you're seeking. So let's move to what I think that is. I don't think it's balance so much as it's just a desire to have peace of mind. We're all being pulled in a million different directions. And yes, that makes us very tired and exhausted. We're also basically connected 24/7. So even if you're in a position where you don't have to check your email on weekends or after hours, my guess is you're still connected. And what I mean by that is text message, Facebook Messenger, Facebook, Instagram, right? So even if you're not connected to your work, you're still connected to others. And you would think, oh, well, connection sounds good. We should be connected. But this is a different kind of connection. We're in a place where it's hard to sit alone with our thoughts and just be. If there's ever a moment of silence or you're waiting on something, whether you're in the grocery line, whether you're at a red light, whether you're sitting in a doctor's office, we no longer know how to just be. And so we immediately pick up our phones. This is what I'm talking about by 24/7 connectivity. There's so much research around this about how it's really mucking up our brains. And that's part of it, okay? So we've got a million things going on. We are connected 24/7. We're all competing to keep up with the Joneses in some way. We live in a very, very materialistic commercial country. And, you look at Instagram especially, and you see all of these like lifestyle brands and these celebrity bloggers, and everything looks so perfect. And so we're all trying to achieve that perfection. Think about birthday parties now. I mean, they're completely over the top for 1-year-olds. They're not even for the children, right? And that's fine. But this is what I'm talking about. It's in absolutely every part of our culture and our life. Everything is this competition to maintain and to be bigger and to be better and to have it all. That's really what it is, right? We're trying to have it all. And it is exhausting. And so we say we want balance, but the truth is we're just overwhelmed and just want some peace, some ease. And I personally don't even know that you can take work out of the equation and you find the balance you're looking for, because it's this sense of competition and overwhelm and connection that is the problem. We have lost our peace. We have lost our ability to just be. And I think sometimes when, you're in a situation where you have to have multiple jobs, like when I think about my grandmother, or when I think of some of the women and men that I have met in third world countries that live in extreme poverty, it's odd. They're not as depressed as some of us are that have so much, because they're not competing. They're not connected 24/7. They don't have time for that. They're not trying to keep up and appear and have it all. They're just trying to get by. And in some way, oddly enough, they're able to maintain more peace, for a lot of different reasons. Some people in those situations, they turn to faith, others turn to family, or they just have a different outlook on life. My grandmother was not a happy-go-lucky woman. She was very serious, but I never heard her complain. Never. I never heard her complain. And she's gone now, so I don't even know if she wanted more. I don't know if I almost think she had just accepted what life was. And I don't know that she lived with, I don't know that she was missing peace. I would really like to have that conversation with her now. But I think that's what we're missing. We're missing the peace part. And I think part of it's because we're trying to attain something that simply is not possible and maybe isn't even desirable. And that leads to this discussion of mental health, emotional health, well-being. We look at Kate Spade, and she, in many ways, from an outsider looking in, she had it all. She had this wonderful empire. She had a ton of success. Everybody knows her name. She represented, a brand that was fun, happy, upbeat. And she sold that brand for a lot of money, was married, had a child, living in the richest part of Manhattan. She really seemed to have it all. And yet she struggled enough with her own personal demons that she took her life, that she felt as though there was no hope. And I think oftentimes we're striving for that next award, that next level of our, work, or we're striving for, the clothes or the home, or our kids having all of these activities or these parties. We're looking to all of these outside things to not just keep up, but for us to feel satisfied. We keep thinking, well, if I achieve that, if I attain that, then I'll be happy. And that's not how it works. I mean, look, I've been in a very poor situation, and I've been in a very, very well-off situation. I've experienced both sides, far ends of the spectrum, and I can tell you, it is far much easier to have money than not have money, okay? If I get to choose, I choose more money. It certainly makes life easier, but it doesn't make your problems go away. Not the internal ones. The internal ones are still there. It helps with the external ones, but not the internal. I had a friend. She listens to the podcast. She knows who she is. She was like, if Kate, who represents such happiness and positivity, like, if she can't do it, like, oh my gosh, like, we're all in trouble. And what I told her, and I think we all, need to remember, is every single one of us has shadows. We all have darkness. We all have secrets. Some of us have depression. Some of us have clinical depression, clinical anxiety. And some of us don't, but we're being treated for it. There are so many discussions that need to be had around mental health, and we're just not having them. I think we see what's on Instagram. We see everyone trying to keep up, and we see these images on the outside, and we forget that everyone is human. We forget that other people have problems. We just see their lives and we're like, oh, wow, they've got everything. I wish I could have that. And then it makes us think that, we're not good enough and that we're really screwed up. We don't generally talk about the shadows. We don't talk about the stuff we're dealing with. I know I don't. I don't get on here and really share my deep stuff with you guys. I try to be authentic. I try to share some stuff with you, but I don't share it all. I don't think we should. Maybe for some people, that's what you need. And if that's for you, go for it. But I think you have to have some discernment around who you share things with. And, to the extent that you guys see me as someone who has everything going for me and life is always perfect and I'm positive and I'm happy and I'm mindful, I don't want you to think that I don't ever have problems. And I don't want you to think that I don't have my own demons, that I don't have my own shadows, because I do. And I think we all do. I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't have some really hard, difficult stuff and some really, really difficult days, but we all know how to show up and put a smile on our face, and for the most part, not let anyone know what's going on. So first and foremost, if you are struggling, if you have things where you just think you're all alone and there's no hope, first and foremost, know that you're not alone. You are human. And even though we don't share it and we don't talk about it, we've all got it. We've all got it. And there is hope. And I've been in the place where I didn't think there was hope, because I know just how deep and dark and ugly that our mind can be if it gets in a depressive state or an unhealthy mental or emotional state. It begins, I always talk about stories, but they're really lies. And if you're in that place, they're really, really dark, heavy lies. But the more you hear them, and the more you're not hearing from anyone else because you're keeping it inside, you start to believe it to be true. And when you lose hope, that's when I think you get situations like Kate. And so I think a lot of what we're looking for is not balance. We're looking for peace. And I don't want to compare those of us, depression, anxiety, mental health that needs to be treated. I'm not trying to compare that to the day-to-day of those that just have unhappiness or stress, because they are two different things. That's much larger than this podcast episode. And I hope you know I am not a mental health care provider, right? But we all struggle and we all want more peace. And so for me, I do think it's a bit of a myth that we're talking about work-life balance. And I think what has helped me more than anything, and what I find works for others, is really finding tools like meditation, finding tools like mindfulness, finding ways to completely unplug, even though we don't think that's possible. It is. Finding ways to create space. And by space, I mean not being connected, not feeling the need to fill up every single minute. And I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. Like, it's hard for me to relax and unwind. It's hard for me to shut off my mind. It goes 100 miles a minute, probably more than that. It just won't stop or shut up. And that's why I have to turn to mindfulness. It's why I have to force myself to do things I don't want to do. For example, we have a place called Radnor Lake near my house. It's this beautiful, gorgeous park with a lake, and it's right by my house. I should take advantage of it all the time, and I don't. Because I resist it. It's so weird. I resist what I know I need. And I was noticing that I was just having this low-level anxiety and just stressed about some things. And I was like, okay, I know what this means. I got to breathe. I got to create space. And so I went for a walk with my dogs, and it was just a 40-minute walk, but it took a ton of effort for me to get my butt, ready in the car, drive over there, and then do that walk when I had a ton of work to do. And to go do it by myself and not take my earbuds and my podcast, just go be in nature. And every time I had a thought, to bring it back to just being present and looking at what was around me. You've got to find what works for you. But I encourage you to consider this concept of, maybe I'm not looking for balance. Maybe I'm just looking for more peace. And part of that peace is making those hard decisions. Part of that peace is setting boundaries. Part of that peace is prioritizing, deciding what is important to you and focusing only on that. Part of peace is accepting who you are and not chasing after things that you think will bring you happiness, and instead trying to focus on what you're grateful for now and finding that happiness now, so that when you achieve whatever you do, it's just so much sweeter. Okay, so like I said, this is a heavy loaded topic, but it's one I've been wanting to have for a while. So I do think it's privileged. It is a very, very privileged conversation. Let's not forget that. Let's have it anyway. And let's focus on what we're really looking for, what we're really needing, and what we're really wanting. Okay, all that said, I'm going to move to a lighter note. Part of what I think helps us find that ease and that peace is to start to live a more integrated life where we are focused on our priorities. So if that's something that you struggle with, if you are overextended and you don't know how to focus, or you're really struggling with, I don't even know what I want, check out Life and Law Live. That's what we're doing in Phoenix in November. It is a 2-day workshop, and we are planning for 2019. And it's not just like linear, logical planning. It is really looking at the various aspects of your life, getting clear on, where you need to let go, where you need to take your foot off the brake, where you need to focus more of your time and energy so that you can be more at peace with your decisions. I mean, that's the idea. It's to bring you more ease. And by the way, for me, that means we're still working hard and still having success. It's going to be different for everyone. And that's what we're doing in that workshop. It's limited to 50 people. We only have, I'm trying to think, I think we have 18 seats left. And good news, we just opened up a payment plan. So if you've actually looked at it before and didn't sign up because you were like, I don't know that I can swing that, just know that we now have a payment plan option. It's a little bit more, but it allows you to split up your payments over 4 months. So if you could use that integrated planning to really make sure that you've got next year set up, I mean, I want you to think about this now, but that will really help you make 2019, hopefully an easier, more peaceful year because you're focusing on what really matters to you. Please, please, please sign up and join us and be in that room. It's going to be amazing. Okay, if you want to check that out, lifeandlawlive.com. And we'll also put that in the show notes. Again, you can find the show notes at hustleandflowpodcast.com/74. Take care of yourselves, my friends. Know that there is hope. You are loved. You are needed. And together we can do this. See you next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.